skeleton send shivers down your spine.
Skeletons in your closet.
Where do you get all these skeletons from?
Oh, they come from India.
India?
International treaty. All skeletons come from India.
No kidding, how come?
How the hell do I know how come? The important question is, where do they get all the skeletons with perfect teeth?
This thing rules. The thing rules.
Oh, hey, what's up? I'm Brian Altano.
And I'm Max Scoville.
This is a show where we discuss something we love,
Unpack why we love it,
explain where it came from,
try to remember our first impressions of it,
share our weird stories about it.
maybe learn something new about it along the way.
But first and foremost, we're here to celebrate the fact that this thing rules.
Are you ready to enter the bone zone?
I love skeletons.
We're going to talk about skeletons. And you know what? I feel like normally when we make this show, we try to do a healthy amount of research, so it's a nice balance of fuck around nonsense and valid information.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about the human body, I don't think this is going to be an informational experience for many people. I think anybody who wants serious information about a skeleton, go look in an x-ray, or go to the doctor, or go to the science classroom and look at that plastic skeleton they got there.
Bump into a wall, see how you feel.
Yeah. But I want to talk about skeletons just in terms of, like, it's you know, it's Halloween time. The 12 foot tall Home Depot skeletons are erecting themselves around the country, all over the place, in people's yards.
It's not just that this is the time of year where everything gets a skeleton.
Everything gets a skeleton.
Things that don't have skeletons get skeletons. You know?
That's one thing I do love is just you go to the craft store, like the, you know, Home Depot or whatever, and they love to give skeletons ears, despite ears not having bones, you know, just to tell you that this is like a dog skeleton, they'll give it ears, or like this is a bat skeleton, they'll give it, you know, they'll give it like unnecessary wing bones.
Yep.
I want to live in the world where things actually have those skeletons.
I think there's like the idea that like that the human skin and flesh is basically just like a candy coating that goes over like a crunchy inner shell, and a lot of people just look at skeletons from a creative perspective as like, doesn't matter, we don't know what's going on in there. And I think, like, I was thinking about this, I was you know, we when we do research for the show, a lot of it is like, oh, when do you think was the first convenience store? And then I was thinking, like, the first guy that found out about skeletons was probably like, what the fuck, like his friend died, or his lover or whatever, and then he looked over and was just like, maybe he'll come back, and then he just didn't. He turned into a skeleton over time.
Yeah, I tried to look into that, and that's one of those things that it predates history. At some point, somebody was like, "Oh yeah, I mean, I guess you find out about skeletons whenever you eat an animal."
Yeah.
So people were probably hip to skeletons pretty early on, and then I guess they realized that humans had skeletons, and they were like, "Oh, we should draw a picture of that on things that will kill you."
Yeah,
I was trying to dig around to find
a fish or something, right? It was probably like, this is probably a soft all the way through.
You can't eat this part. What?
There's all this crunchy.
The cool
shit
thing
in
about
there.
a fish skeleton is it comes with free toothpicks if you're a caveman.
That is true, and also like a lot of fish have crunchy shit on the outside too. So it's called scales.
That is true. But I don't know. Like, were you ever scared of skeletons? Like, actually?
So I was thinking about this. There's definitely the old. I don't think was it Disney? There's just like really old ancient cartoons that have a bunch of skeletons in them. That used to scare me on like a very basic level.
You talking about spooky, scary skeletons?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but for the most part, I always thought they were really cool. Seeing them in real life in museums and stuff like that was the first time I was like a little scared. But like pop culture wise, they never really scared me. Because I think when they animated them, it was always just like, my brain immediately, even as a child, was like, oh, there's not enough there to make them move or do anything. And also, like, I was like, if they bit you or whatever, like, where would it go? It would just fall through their neck, you know? Like, they could scratch you with their bony little fingers. Like, that would feel cold and gross. But for the most part, like, for something to scare me, it would have to be like, you know, like a shark is going to eat me, or, you know, a vampire is going to turn me into myself forever or whatever. Like here, there was nothing really where I was like, this is terrifying. What about you?
I went through a phase where I was legitimately like skeletons were like my number one fear, which in hindsight is really funny to me because skeletons are all around you.
Yeah.
They're just invisible inside your body. Like I don't know. It's really funny to be scared of something that I am.
That you have in you.
Yeah. But I remember having having a like staying at my aunt's house and having, like spending the night at some unfamiliar place was already scary to begin with, but then having a really bad dream that the closet was full of skeletons, which honestly is such a cliche. Like it's a figure of speech. Like that's how cliche it is. Mm-hmm. And then like leaping out of bed and like running in there and then being scared of that closet for probably years after that. That closet was full of my cousin's old Lego sets. I should have been getting in there way sooner. There was all kinds of cool stuff in there. Oddly enough, that was before Lego started making skeleton little minifigs. They just had the Ghost, but the Ghost was pretty cool. But no, then I went to the Peabody Museum in Massachusetts in Cambridge, like outside Harvard. It's like the Natural History Museum's like snooty little cousin. But they have some really cool stuff there, and they have an entire room which is quite literally a bone zone, and they have like basically, one of those good old fashioned just halls of taxidermy. Like they killed every animal they possibly could and then stuffed it, and then they also have like a giant whale skeleton on the ceiling, and then there's a section where it's just a bunch of different primate skeletons. And I remember going there, and there were two that scared me in particular. There was the human skeleton, which is obviously scary because it's this human skeleton. I don't know. There's some primal thing about that being scary. But then, have you ever seen a gibbon skeleton?
No,
because it looks like somebody just warped a human skeleton, which is, I'm describing the exact reverse of evolution. What actually happened was we warped the gibbon skeleton probably to make our skeletons, but it looks enough like a human skeleton but it's fucking scary. Like I feel like other primate skeletons, you're like, okay, so like you can look at it and you're like, oh, that looks like that looks like a gorilla, that looks like a chimpanzee or whatever. The gibbon just looks like you took the Photoshop, free transform tool and just went wackadoo on the joints and just made certain parts way too long. Like the forearms are just enormous, so it just looks like if one of these showed up in a FromSoft game, I would probably die and then come back and beat the shit out of it. But it's just a good scary skeleton.
I remember seeing the skeleton for Lucy, the missing link lady. They had that at the Museum of Natural History in New York growing up, and that fucked me up because I was kind of like, oh, they caught like that middle morph between monkeys and man, mm-hmm. and then they put it in a glass box in a museum forever. And I just thought about how pained that skeleton's life was, because like in my brain as a kid, I was like, oh, so there was like monkeys, and then there was Lucy, and then there's us. Like it was just like somebody got the short end of the stick, when in reality there was like evolution for a very long time between those two events. But for me, I'm like, aha, they caught this one fucked up monkey lady that was just like caught between worlds,
I do love our tendency to just truncate time into manageable ideas. The idea that cavemen showed up 20 minutes after dinosaurs died or whatever. Yep. At one point we're riding them. That's probably not how it was. I would argue that's inaccurate. I don't think that Flintstones cartoon is honestly. Yeah.
We went to the Museum of Natural History and we ate edibles. And at one point I walked in this huge room and I was like, I can't believe all these animals were alive at the same time. And you were like, Brian, no, they weren't. I was like, oh, fuck, you're right. Because I was like, it was the dinosaur room. It's all dinosaur skeletons, which is like one of the best skeletons, by the way. Because I think that like when you see a dinosaur skeleton, they try to show you the whole thing, because they're like, look, we got the whole thing without breaking it. We sent the guys down there in the ground. They got a little wet. They hit it with the little hammers and shit like that. And then, fucking John Hammond shows up with his helicopter and there's dust flying everywhere. And he pops a champagne. But with people skeletons, you see the skeleton a lot, but we mostly are like the skull's the coolest part. We don't really care about like sometimes we show you the rib cage on t-shirts and stuff like that. Like there's those t-shirts that's just a rib cage. But like how many shirts do you have that have like a skull on them? Because I have like 9.
Most of my shirts have skulls on them in some form.
Yeah,
it's actually kind of It's kind of stupid that we're basically both just the bad guy from Toy Story.
Yeah,
like we're both just Sid.
We take better care of our action figures, but otherwise, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you see a dinosaur skeleton and they're like, we got all of it. You know, we fucked up the ankle a little bit. We fucked up the knee a little bit. And then like 20 years later, they're like, we actually fucked up the whole thing. This is not what it's supposed to look like at all. We did the puzzle piece wrong.
Yeah, no, it was just some dude kit bashing. Like, the guy would dig up a bunch of, like, what is it? The Brontosaurus wasn't a real dinosaur. It was just some fan fiction that some Victorian dude glued together.
Yeah, they don't even know what they found
Yeah.
plates or whatever. They found like cutlery and shit like that. They're like, yeah, that's a dinosaur.
Yeah.
They had T-shirts of it forever. I had a T-shirt that said Brontosaurus on it when I was a kid for years, and that's bullshit.
Yeah, that is
They
bullshit.
took that from us.
They didn't have did it have a picture of it on there, or just say the word Brontosaurus?
It had a question mark at the end. No, it said Brontosaurus, and there was like a silhouette, which is like close enough. You know,
I had a pair of socks, and one of the socks said wolf on it, but it didn't say it on the other one.
what is it? A parasox? Is that a type of dinosaur?
Yeah, parasox. We're going to form a time parasox. No, I want to talk about skeletons in pop culture because that is clearly an area we are better informed in. I think, in the grand spectrum of skeleton knowledge, I think we're maybe like 2 or 3 notches above the Victorian dude who invented the Brontosaurus out of shit he found in a yard somewhere.
Yeah.
Like we should not be allowed to make a podcast about actual bone skeletons, but fictional cartoon video game skeletons, I think we can talk about that a little bit. I have assembled a list of the best skeletons in popular culture, arranged in kind of a loose, not really any particular order, if we're being honest here, but
So just sort of like a brontosaurus skeleton.
it's really a
of
brontosaurus
list.
skeleton of a listicle here. But
Okay.
let me just rapid fire through this, and most of them I feel like we know, but we can stop on a few of them and linger a little bit. Skeletor is the big
Yeah.
one because
Yeah,
his
one of my
name
favorites.
is one letter off from skeleton.
One of my first exposures to a pop culture skeleton, and also one that made me not that scared of skeletons because he's so ridiculous.
He is ridiculous.
You know,
he's just
and-
yeah.
And he's got like these weird kind of webby hands and stuff like that. So he's not really that. And he's blue.
He's blue with a green. I don't know what's going on there.
He's
I
more of
should
a
know.
lizard.
I like him a lot.
Me too.
He's a real good one. He's just honestly, Skeletor is just kind of top tier design. Like he's just
Yeah.
like they're like, what? Let's give him a skull. Why? Because it looks fucking sick. Give him a skull. Who cares?
Change a letter from the real thing. Shit.
Yeah. Ghost Rider,
Yeah.
who
fucking
is
awesome.
just a biker with a skull that's on fire. Are you fucking kidding me? That is
Like,
so
come on.
cool. Yeah, kicks ass. And
How do you screw that up?
Well, you make him
I
a
guess you
Nazi.
do a couple of
You Red Skull is like Ghost Rider, but what if he was a Nazi and he
Yeah.
had sort of skin on his skull, but also it wasn't on fire? It just looked like it was on fire at some point. I'm not wild about Red Skull. Total, just a hard right, not as hard right as Red Skull's politics, but Dry Bones from Mario, who's a Koopa skeleton.
Which is a concept they've then put onto, like they've done. There's Dry Bowser, which is just, I don't like that they keep using that word. It's not good, because it implies a wet Bowser, which
Yeah,
I guess
no.
he is because he lives in the sewers and stuff like that a lot. But yeah, Dry Bones is great. What's awesome about him is like you can't just kill him normally. If like you jump on him, he comes back, and I like that concept of like a skeleton that keeps returning.
Unkillable skeletons in video games is such a stupid conceit that we all just completely take for granted. Mm-hmm. Where you're like, oh no, you got to kill it again because it's making rattling noises. It's gonna come back.
Really good. I mean, a lot of video games, but really good skeletons in Ghosts and Goblins, Ghouls and Ghosts, all those. The
Kibbles and Bits, good and plenty. Yeah.
Gooses and Goosebumps, or whatever. That whole franchise.
Those are good. Jack Skellington, not in video. Oh, yeah, I guess he's in Kingdom Hearts or whatever. We don't talk about that here. I rewatched Nightmare Before Christmas, or I guess I put on music. That movie's so goddamn good. It's such.
It is
good
really
time.
good. Yeah, I'm always stuck in when to watch that movie because it feels too early for Christmas and too late for Halloween.
It's an odd one.
Moment.
And
Yeah.
Thanksgiving doesn't feel right at all. Mm-hmm. But I love that Jack Skellington, first of all, the fact that they were like, let's turn skeleton into a last name. That is the second most creative use of the word skeleton since Skeletor, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I like that he's not even, like, he's just a really popular guy. Like he's the prom king of Halloween Town. They don't even really fully, like, he comes out of a cauldron in the beginning and they're like, yeah, there he is. Hooray. He's going to dance. He's going to do a pumpkin dance or whatever. And it's like, what? He's like Ferris Bueller for Halloween, I guess. Like he has no place
Yeah.
in that parade, but he's the head of it. I don't know.
I like his whole thing a lot because he's bridging two holidays I like a ton for very different reasons, which is I feel like is very, very different from what we do in reality, which is like we have, you know, like Mariah Carey is Frozen on Ice, and then on, you know, the clock strikes midnight on Halloween, and she's like, haha, I'm out. And it's just not, it feels rushed. You
If
know?
you could get a movie that connected two holidays like Nightmare Before Christmas does, they don't have to be near each other, what holidays would you connect?
I mean, we're getting some pretty decent Thanksgiving horror movies recently. But I think if you, New Year's Eve and
New Year's Easter?
New Year's Eve and Valentine's Day would be good, because I like the whole concept of that, the old man becoming a baby and then falling in love.
I was going a similar direction with that. I was thinking Easter and New Year's. You know, like the ball drops, you wake up the next morning and there's just pink rabbits and stuff everywhere. You know, you roll the stone away from your bedroom door 3 days later with a killer hangover, and there's just baby chicks for some reason. You're like, all right, time for the Cadbury cream eggs. So much for a New Year's resolution.
You wake up on Christmas morning and there's just fucking eggs everywhere, and you're like, what? Who did
Christmas
this?
eggs, why not? Anyway, let's see. One of my personal favorites, who's debatably even a skeleton, but the Misfit skull is officially known as the Crimson Ghost. He's also known as the Fiend Skull. He's based on an old movie about, it's just like a guy in a skull mask. I've actually never seen it. I think it's Vincent Price. I don't know, but he's on most of my clothing. I'm actually just like flat out amazed I don't have a tattoo of that stupid thing. I realize that being a Misfits fan is kind of just like being a slightly lower budget like member of the Kiss army. Like it's just punk Kiss really, but
yeah,
whatever. I like that skull. It's funny because that one actually, I realized that it that's like such an iconic thing in pop culture that's all over the place. But it's still like Misfits is still kind of in the margins. And I realized the first place I ever saw it without realizing it is it's on Danny's shirt in the first Ninja Turtles movie.
That's right. Yeah, I just rewatched that recently.
And I just remember being like, it was kind of burned into my memory from seeing it there. And then I saw it out in the wild and I was like, what is that? And it, it wasn't until I was in my, mid to late teens that I was like, wait, there's a band that sings songs about skeletons and they're cool bands. And, it's, I saw. I don't know. We'll get into the Misfits another time, but I do love that good skeleton. Debatably a skeleton, Scorpion from Mortal Kombat, because he rips his mask off and he's a skull that breathes fire, but other times he's just like a dude, and I don't really know.
I'll allow it. I mean, every
Okay.
skeleton is kind of a dude, but or person.
Do you ever think that maybe he's a regular guy, but then he ripped his mask off too hard and just pulled his own face off? That would be like, again, like not even a top 10 grossest thing that happens in Mortal Kombat, but those dudes can like rip each other's hearts out. Like to think maybe, like you ever just, you try to take off your sweatshirt or whatever, you accidentally pull your shirt up over your tummy and you're like, oops, didn't mean to do that. Do you think he did that with his mask? Like he just went to reach and pull it off and he just ripped his own face off, and to just hide his embarrassment, he just breathes fire?
I think it's definitely feasible. I think it's interesting because there's like all the other palette swap versions of him that became their own characters, and they don't really do the skeleton thing.
No,
that's just his kind of deal.
Well, another very good skeleton that honestly I didn't even occur to put on this list because it debatable. The Terminator endoskeleton, the T-800 or the T-850.
Oh no, dude,
I guess
that's an incredible skeleton.
Yeah.
That totally deserves a place on the list. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what's awesome about that skeleton that shows you he's fucking great is one of the first times you see him, he steps on a real skeleton.
Oh my God, I never even put that
Yeah.
together. That's so cool.
Like he's just like, you think skeletons are cool? Well, I'm cooler. Like he's literally sending you the visual metaphor of saying this is a fucking better
Listen,
skeleton.
people give James Cameron a hard time for having like cringy dialogue, but then he'll do something like that, which is like, it's, I'm 12 and this is deep.
Right.
It's really
I mean,
establishing this is the dominant species on Earth. It is not. It's more human than human.
I don't adhere to the James Cameron has cringy dialogue debate at all. I think that's bullshit. Just for the record, we could do a whole James Cameron episode.
We got it. We're going to do that. We're going to come back and talk about
Yeah.
Jimmy Cameron. But in the meanwhile, we got Manuel Calavera, who's the skeleton dude from Grim Fandango.
Yeah,
That's
a good
actually
one.
a blind spot for me. I've always loved that aesthetic, but I never finished that whole game. I kind of went back and played it, but I know people love that one.
Me too. It seems weird because like we said, skeletons pop up in video games a lot. There's not, and like I'm a big Star Wars guy. There's not a ton of skeleton stuff in Star Wars. We're obviously getting Skeleton Crew, a show, but that's not really about skeletons.
There is one. Skeleton Astronaut, or was it Skeleton Spaceman or whatever?
Yeah.
What's he called? There's a there's an Instagram account by this guy who, is it called Skeleton Astronaut? He's, oh my god, I'm totally drawing a blank on his name. But basically, there's this one character in episode 1 who walks by, who's just, it's just a spaceman with like a skull.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about?
Awesome. Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever tracked. I know who you're talking about, the Instagram person, but I didn't know about the other thing. I mean, Darth Vader's helmet always kind of looked like a skull.
Yeah.
I'm actually pretty partial to not necessarily Star Wars, but sort of, Lucas Spielberg adjacent, the skeleton at the end of Goonies. Like, there's some really great skeletons.
You mean
in
the pipe organ or whatever?
Well, there's that, but there's also, the what's his name, the pirate captain.
One-Eyed Willie.
Yeah, One-Eyed Willie that they find at the end of the movie.
Here's a good one. I want to talk about some Spielberg skeletons in a second, but let's just rapid fire this other list of pop culture skeletons, lickety split, in 2 shakes of a bone. There's Sir Daniel Fortescue from Medieval, that old another low poly skeleton. There's the Crypt Keeper. I was skeptical about this one because he's kind of a zombie, but I guess he is also a skeleton. Like, he's just old. I don't know if that counts, but
I don't know. He's got enough skin on the bones to be a different thing than a skeleton.
Exactly, yeah, and he's got hair, which I feel like disqualifies him.
Yeah.
Spinal from Killer Instinct, who I love because he's got like a sword and like a headband, I think, and like a shield, but no clothes.
Great
so he's just like a nudist skeleton. There's something very, like, great design, but also dumb as hell.
Butt naked with a headband is something like a 5-year-old does, where they run in the room and they're like holding a cardboard sword. Yeah, it's very funny.
Just got out of the bath, time to kill somebody, gonna fight full gore. There's Grimm from the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, which was like kind of a cartoon I was like late to the party on. I feel like that was on. That's one of those ones I watched because it was on sometimes, even though I was too old for it, or I was like not that it was like before, Dragon Ball Z and a cartoon for thinking adults came on or whatever. But there's Sans and Papyrus from Undertale, who, named after fonts. They're popular modern skeletons. There are even
very, very good laughs too.
Yeah, very popular skeletons in recent years are the spooky, scary skeletons from the 1929 Disney short, which have become like, really, it's kind of wild how much that just blew up. Like that little weird, those dancing skeletons, like people bust out that animated GIF, they bust out that song. It's a good song. It's one of those things where it's like just up there with like Big Chungus is like the internet finding some ancient shit from like before World War II started and being like, hey, what about this cartoon? And there's all these like people being like, we have a brand new Netflix series, and kids are just like, what about this shit from 1932 or whatever? And it's like, how did that happen? The Horned King from another deep cut Disney thing, the Black Cauldron.
Oh,
you ever see that?
Yeah, I have.
So I read those books growing up, the Lloyd Alexander Prydain Chronicles or whatever, and the Horned King. I remember like being like, he was the closest thing to a Dark Souls boss I encountered in my imagination when I was 10. Like, he's fucking gnarly. They just describe him as like, I mean, honestly, he sounds like kind of a budget Sauron in a lot of ways, but he's just this dude who's a skeleton with like horns on his head, and I think he's even scarier in the book, but they do an okay job in that cartoon.
Worth diagonal sort of adjacent on this list is worth pointing out that another cool pop culture skeleton is every time a cartoon character gets electrocuted, and you get to see their skeleton. That's
true.
Always, that's a nice peek. Sometimes if it's Daffy Duck, he's got a beak going on.
It is odd, yeah.
Yeah, you get a peek behind the curtain.
A beak behind the curtain.
Yeah. A beak.
Now, speaking of going diagonal and adjacent, what about adjacent in the Argonauts and the Skeleton Army, the Ray Harryhausen stop motion skeletons?
Amazing, and genuinely scary when you're a kid, right? Like, I think that's probably up there. When you asked me before, like that's probably one of the ones where I was like, oof, that's creepy.
Those ones I feel like are sort of like a linchpin, like a keystone skeletons, because I think a lot of people saw those when they were young who went on to make video games that we know and love. Like, if you look up sort of skeletons in video games or skeletons in pop culture online, there's a whole thing about how they're like a low-level enemy in D&D, which of course made them just a standard basic enemy you fight in so many video games because so many people grew up with that. And I have to feel like Gary Gygax probably was like, yeah, skeletons, fuck them, fight army skeletons, let's do it. Another army was Army of Darkness, which has lots of good skeletons in it. Some good ones in there.
Awesome.
You mentioned, Steven Spielberg pirate skeletons. There's also the Pirates of the Caribbean skeletons, which, as legend has it, were originally real skeletons.
Real
in
skeletons,
Disneyland.
yeah. That was so. I used to go on that ride a lot when I was a kid. When we would go to Disney World, and then because the thing with that ride was it was always hot and muggy in Disney World, and that is a water ride, and it's mostly underground and dark, so it was nice and cool and damp in there. And then the movies started coming out, and you had to wait like an hour to get in, so it defeated the purpose because it was like you have to stand directly in the sun to get in there. But yeah, there were some great skeletons in there, and they say dead men tell no tales over this very echoey, like it just sounds like wood. Like it's great. It's great.
I never went on that. I've seen the movie, which again has some pretty good skeletons in it. I appreciate that. And that's one of those ones where like Johnny Depp's recent antics, or not, in the last 20 years, I suppose, have kind of soured me on him. But that first movie was fun as hell, and it was like kind of a shocker that like, whoa, you made a movie based on a theme park ride that has pirate skeletons in it, and it kind of kicks ass. Like, go figure. That's wild. Another Disney skeleton outing, Coco from Pixar. That was the whole Day of the Dead thing.
Yes, yeah. Hardest I've ever cried watching a Pixar movie.
Really?
Actually, yeah.
Wow. Damn.
Yeah. Yeah, that when that Remember Me song comes on at the end, it's just poof.
Yeah, I think the first viewing of Up was the one that really did it to me. Mm-hmm. But also going back every time, that still fucks me up. Anyway, High Lord Wolner from Dark Souls 3 is fucking awesome. He's just that big ass skeleton from the ground. He's just like a big crawling guy. One of my dream project for a yard decoration that my wife has not said explicitly no to quite yet. Everybody knows about the 12-foot tall Home Depot skeleton, which is just like a big ass, fully humanoid skeleton. Party City tried to one up that. And I don't think they successfully have quite yet, but they have it's like a skeleton coming out of the ground.
Yeah.
Have you seen this one?
Yes.
Where it's basically High Lord Wolner waiting to happen.
So Costco sells one like that, and I think you're supposed to put it on your roof, or you could. And I went to Costco with my wife and my kid, and my kid was like, "Dada, look." And I was like, holy shit, that's awesome. Because she's super into Halloween stuff. We go to Spirit Halloween, like, leading up to Halloween, we go there like every 2 weeks and just like, it's like a little museum in there. Just look at all the animatronics and all that fun stuff. And we see this huge skeleton in there. I swear it's like 7 feet wide, maybe 5.5, 6 feet, and like 4.5 feet tall. And it looks like it's coming out of the ground. It's just the top half of the skeleton. And I turn around to my wife, and I know she's going to be like, of course not, no. But I turn around and I'm like, we really need that. And my kid's like, yeah, I think we really need that, Mama. We really need to get the skeleton. And this other dad in the store who's like 6 feet from us, who also has a young girl and a wife, and they're both standing there. He like gets what I'm putting down, and he goes, wow, I think every family needs one of those big skeletons for the backyard or the roof. And I go, I agree. Every family would do better by having a big skeleton in the backyard or the roof. And look, there's a perfect one right there. And he goes, I'm hearing it's even improving the value of the homes. So we just turned into a bit. And like you could see his wife and my wife's eyes just lock and roll at the same time.
Yeah.
And we're all just like laughing, and I high-fived the guy, and we moved on. But it was like, that was such a wonderful dad shared bonding experience over a skeleton that neither of us is allowed to own.
I love that. No, apparently my wife was like considering getting that Home Depot skeleton as like a birthday present for me one year, which, see, the problem is that we have neighbors that are down the street who are just so much fucking cooler than us, because they have that skeleton, but their entire house is just goth. Like, they have a black house, and they have the skeleton up year round, and they change its attire based on what holiday is happening. So when Christmas is coming around, they put like a little Santa hat on it, and when it's summer, they put like a midsummer flower crown on it.
Oh, I love it.
It's just, they really commit to the bit, and I know that we wouldn't do that because we'd have these brief lapses of adulthood where we're like, we should get succulents for the yard. We should get some chrysanthemums or whatever. And I'm just like, maybe I just need to fucking lean into it and just do High Lord Wolner. And like, that dude, I mean, again, I forget you go to like some giant's grave or whatever, and you get summoned into this, endless black pit in Dark Souls 3. And this fucking guy comes out of the dark, and he's just the torso of a skeleton. You don't even see the rest of his body. I don't think they rendered it. He just comes out, and he's like, you know, he's just a massive giant skeleton. He starts whooping your ass. He starts slamming his, you know, I think he's got a sword or something. Maybe he just hits you with his hand. I don't know. But he's got this headdress that is made of tiny skulls.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's fucking awesome.
So he's got like Rick James hair, but instead of beads, it's just skulls. And he's got he's so fucking
FromSoft
cool.
is pretty much the modern king of everything, but they're modern kings of video game skeletons for sure.
So many good skeletons in there. And I love that they just bring back that goddamn skeleton in Elden Ring, but he's just, they should just call it Skeleton Ring. But
There's a little basket of skeletons in Bloodborne that I love.
oh yeah,
those
are
fuckers.
these skeletons? They're like, I don't know what they
Kinda.
are. They're kind of. I was also exploring the idea of getting a bird bath and making some of those guys. I really just want to do a FromSoft yard. You know, I don't know what that does to the value of a home. I feel like
I lived next to a house a couple years ago that got 3 of the really tall Home Depot skeletons and then a bunch of the little ones and just arranged them so they're crawling all over the house and climbing all this type of shit. And like when you see one of those things and it's just standing there, it's like, oh, that's cool. But when you see like a bunch and they're posed well and it looks like they're either escaping or attacking a house, one of the coolest things on earth. Like
that
props
kicks
to them.
so much ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah,
There's variants of the Home Depot skeleton they make now where they have like animated eyes. There's a Target makes a orange skeleton that's like life size, but I think it's got like a pumpkin themed head.
That's fucking stupid. I don't like
Yeah,
that.
I got one of those.
Fuck off with that. Get out of here.
Yeah, I got like a regular 6 foot tall skeleton.
I know. I've met you.
Ago.
I could tell that's what you had under there.
And yeah, he's great. And my kid got I think somebody at her school gave out just like a bag of crazy eyeballs. So she had all these plastic eyeballs that are like ping pong balls. And last year I used duct tape and stuck them in the back, and immediately was kind of like, oh, I should have used super glue or like, you know, hot glue gun or something like that. So like one of them would start to tilt out a little bit and the other one would just straight up fall out or droop. So like my skeleton had, who my kid calls Skelly, would just have like at any given moment 2 eyes dangling at completely different angles. And around Halloween season, we just put him in a chair outside and there he is. He just hangs out there and it's great.
I love
It's good
that.
to have. Everyone should have one of those.
Skeletons are fucking great. They're awesome.
And then he's in my garage the rest of the year, not even in storage. Like he'll be standing up against the wall or he's like leaning against my arcade cabinet. I make sure he's out and about. He's
good. That's why we're friends.
Living his
You
life.
Respect the skeleton. It's good to respect a good plastic skeleton you got at the store. It's probably a more complicated issue respecting an actual physical skeleton. And those fine folks in Hollywood have a spotty little track record in terms of how you do or do not do that. Let's talk about it. Here's some fucked up skeleton movie trivia for all of our fine listeners at home. Tobe Hooper, who infamously directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then directed Poltergeist, but people think Spielberg directed it. That's a whole weird thing. Both of those movies have real skeletons in them. With Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I feel like you can sort of forgive it because they were doing some weird fucked up low budget stuff and they're like, okay, whatever. And at the time, getting a real skeleton was apparently cheaper than getting a fake one. Because apparently the Spirit Halloween stores hadn't shown up yet. And
They weren't really on and popping yet. Stores were still in business, and they couldn't go out of business for Spirit Halloween to take over.
Exactly. The economy was too good. Circuit City was just a town back at the day, long from being a ghost town, aka a Spirit Halloween store.
Do you think that there's like, I think you should. I'll put it this way: there should be a thing on the back of your driver's license where you can say it would be okay to use your skeleton in a movie.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
They can track that down. They can put the ID in my hand. I'm fine with you using my skeleton in a movie.
I'm going to say that right now, too.
Yeah.
I want my skeleton to be famous.
Yeah. I have to clear that with my family first in case they bury me. Because, if
my
you
organs go to science, but my skeleton goes to the low-budget filmmakers.
Yeah. So you can just, if I'm not already in the ground, you can use my skeleton forever. If I'm down there already, then you gotta clear it with people to dig it out.
Okay, so speaking of people not having things cleared with them, Jo Beth Williams, who was in Poltergeist, is infamously there's a swimming pool scene where she's in a swimming pool full of skeletons, They're real. They're real skeletons. And she did not find out about that until years later when she apparently bumped into one of the special effects people who was like, hey, you really hung in there great. You did a great job not freaking out with all those real, actual human remains that were real skeletons of actual people who were alive at some point. And she went, zoinks. And she was like, well, I guess... And like she gives a, compelling performance of being scared of the skeletons that she thought were not real. They were real fucking skeletons.
I will say I haven't swam with skeletons, but I have been to the catacombs in Paris, and being around that many skeletons, real actual skeletons. Like they build walls out of skulls, and then they take all the extra parts and they throw them on top, like, stock boys do at Office Max or whatever. Deeply unsettling. Like one of those things where it makes you question your entire mortality. You're like, what am I doing?
What are these people at Office Max doing? What are these stock boys up to?
Why do they
over
keep
there?
putting all this?
The nerve of these kids.
Yeah.
Another movie that almost had real human remains in it was Apocalypse Now, which has its fair share of weird shit in it already. But apparently, Coppola, in between having swimming pools dug by locals and having, flatware imported from Paris and drinking bathtubs full of champagne or whatever, wanted to have real human remains, for use in the movie. And then the police showed up and went, excuse me, this skeleton supplier you've been doing business with is a grave robber. We have to take him with us. So that didn't happen. I
wonder if they were like, but all the cocaine you're doing is fine. Keep that up.
Carry on. Yeah, no. This one was new to me. I dug this up. No pun intended. I exhumed this information while poking around for, Dawn of the Dead. Full of great special effects, great zombies. Zombies are a whole other episode we got to talk about someday. But there is apparently a real skeleton in Dawn of the Dead. Early on in the movie, this is the original, the George Romero 1978 one, not the pretty good Zack Snyder one. When they bust that apartment complex in the beginning, for reasons that are honestly not really on brand for the movie, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. There's just a random like mummy skeleton in the background. Like I actually never noticed this watching it, but there's just like a skeleton wrapped in a sheet. And apparently, that is a real human skeleton who has since been named Dawn Doe. And what happened there, allegedly, is there was some costume shop or something where you could basically rent the skeleton for $100, whatever. Tom Savini showed up on set with the skeleton and was like, hey, I brought a skeleton. You want to make some scary stuff with it? And Romero was probably like, this is a zombie movie, but okay, put it in the corner.
Of skeleton.
Yeah, dress it up like a mummy, put it in the corner, dude. And Tom Savini was like, but wait, let me work my movie magic. And he put apparently a mixture of like liquid latex, cotton, and Rice Krispies on it to make it look like it had skin falling off.
This was something he rented?
I don't know if you rented it. Honestly, that's the weird part, is that there's not really any paper trail for this skeleton, but it wound up at some point in the window of a costume shop somewhere in the Pittsburgh area. And I think at that point you could rent it. Maybe they were like, it was in Dawn of the Dead, check it out. But they still had the shit that Tom Savini put on it that looked like fake skin. Some policemen came by. Apparently, I don't really know what the story is here. It gets a little bit weird. There are newspaper articles about this. The police came by and they went, hey lady, what's going on with that skeleton in the window? That looks awfully realistic. And she goes, no, don't worry about it. That's just liquid latex and Rice Krispies and cotton that Tom Savini put on there. And they peel it off and they go, no, that's a real skeleton. And so they took it to a forensic scientist. They poked into it. I mean, probably cut it apart or whatever. And they were like, oh no, that's a dead woman.
Oh my God.
That is the skeleton of a woman in her 30s who died apparently hundreds of years ago. And this was something they figured out in the early 80s. And so I guess I don't even know.
She should have filled out the thing on the back of her driver's
Yeah,
license.
she should have gotten just put the sticker on there that says you want to be in Dawn of the Dead. But they wound up, I guess, I don't know how slow crime was that this was a thing that was like the top of the list for stuff for judges to do. But a judge was like, this skeleton has to be buried. And so they went and they buried the skeleton in an actual proper graveyard. But it gave it kind of like an unmarked grave. I don't know what that funeral was like.
That is the like longest walk to feed Rice Krispie treats to worms.
That's fair. 31 years later, there was somebody who was making a documentary called Road Trip of the Dead who found all this information out. There's newspaper articles about the whole judge ruling and all that. And this guy was like, well, in the name of, doing this poor body justice and also probably trying to raise awareness of my Dawn of the Dead documentary, let's crowdfund a proper, headstone. And so started, I don't know, Indiegogo or whatever to get an actual proper, headstone, whatever it's called, gravestone. And the lady who ran the costume shop where it had been up for rental felt bad and was like, I will pay the entire price of that gravestone, and just gave him like $1,100. And so now somewhere there's actually, I Googled it, there's multiple Mount Lebanon cemeteries in the greater Pittsburgh area. One of them has somebody named Dawn Doe, who was that skeleton from Dawn of the Dead. That's my second favorite skeletons in movies story. Now, Return of the Living Dead. This is my final skeleton tale, and then we can close the casket on this topic. But Return of the Living Dead, directed by Dan O'Bannon. In Return of the Living Dead, there's a conversation that happens at the beginning of the movie where basically the main character is working at a medical supply warehouse, and it's his first day on the job, and his boss takes him over and says, check it out, here's one of those medical skeletons for scientific research. Notice anything funny? And he goes, what? And he goes, look at that, perfect teeth. And he goes, what's up with that? And he goes, they got skeleton farms in India. Which seems just like weird kind of wackadoo, zombie movie writing. Rewind a few years, Dan O'Bannon, again, who directed that movie, was the writer for Alien. When they were making Alien, H.R. Giger was brought on to design the xenomorph costume. And H.R. Giger, being the weirdest guy who ever worked on any movie, goes, I need real human remains to make the xenomorph. And so they were like, all right, get this weird pervert some fucking skeletons. And so they went on, I don't know what they went on. They're not online. They went on the phone book, or they figured out how to get skeletons at some point. And they show up with like just truckloads. Like if you look at the, the set design for Alien, look at the, the space jockey, stuff like that. A lot of that is pieced together from weird skeletons and odd arrangements, which just looks like a Giger drawing, but that was all, I think, cast from actual bones that Giger did weird stuff with. The xenomorph, you look at the classic xenomorph helmet or the head or whatever, that has a human skull underneath it, which is part of the reason it's so fucking scary. And you can kind of see it's sort of translucent. You can kind of see the eye sockets. All of that began as actual human remains, which showed up again with perfect teeth. And Dan O'Bannon said, what the fuck? Why does this skeleton have perfect teeth? And so that's the weird connection between the xenomorph, which we'll talk about another time, and skeleton farms. It's
a beautiful, again, human resources. We that's what we needed. That's the HR they needed for that. One thing we didn't talk about is that skeletons in history have sort of been inextricably connected to xylophones.
Yeah.
Which is very funny to me because a lot of other things don't always get the same instrument, but xylophones, they gave them that a lot. There was a lot of the sort of like they, because it's supposed to mimic the sound of a rib cage or their bones clacking around on the ground. I haven't
interacted with enough actual human bones, and this is not a complaint by any means, but I don't know if they actually have the acoustics of a xylophone. But pop culture has conditioned me to think that if you took an armload of skeleton parts and just threw them on the ground, they would sound like a xylophone.
Hit them with a rubber mallet.
Yeah.
Roll it across. Yeah, you would get it just like that. I'm into it. I think that skeletons are probably one of the best things ever. Like in terms of a thing we all have that has made it into so many other cool things. Like I don't really think any other part of our body is cooler than skeleton.
I don't think anything is cooler than skeleton. Honestly, if I didn't have skeleton, I would just collapse right here, right now. I would just fall flat on my ass and go.
If anybody's listening and they don't have skeleton, we got to get you one.
Well, they don't have a bone to pick. They don't have that, because if there's no bones, then yeah.
If there's some sort of puddleman listening to the show that has headphones laid next to it, and you shake every time loud noises get played or music like in Ghostbusters 2, let us know.
Yeah. Sound off in the comments 6 feet below.
Yeah, or reanimate the Statue of Liberty and come over to our house.
I think it's time we bury this and lay it to rest. So, on that note,
thank you for joining us here in the Bone Zone. This has been a good time.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Which is very funny that's what they call making love.
Yeah,
because Skeletons
Because of all
don't
the
really
things
do
that do have a bone, it's that the parts needed for that isn't any of them.
It's like the one thing they never really give the skeletons, even though they'll give anything a skeleton, like ears and tails, but not that.
I think we can stop recording now.
Yeah, we should stop
The end.
before they give the skeletons penises.
Stop.
Oh, wait, hold up. One more thing. Before we go, just a very friendly reminder / desperate plea for all of our listeners to support the show however you can.
Each and every single like, share, subscribe, rating, review, follow, favorite, bookmark, upvote, and comment we receive helps us grow our audience.
Even a good up dog helps us out.
Every single little tidbit of organic interaction we get helps convince those cold, unfeeling algorithms that this show is actually worth anyone's time.
Good old-fashioned word of mouth works too, so if you think this show rules, tell people about it. Tell your friends.
Friends, lovers, strangers, enemies, whoever.
And of course, we might have mentioned kicking us $1 or $2 on Patreon is huge. Also has some really cool perks.
For instance, $1 a month gets access to bonus content. $5 gets you each week's episode on Tuesdays instead of Fridays.
And for a few dollars more, you can help decide the good, bad, and ugly topics for future episodes.
Head to patreon.com/thisthingrules to see for yourself. However you support the show, even if it's just making time to listen to us talk about our favorite stuff, you rule, and we love you for it. We'll see you next week. Or we'll hear you next week. Or you hear us.
You'll hear us.
We'll talk to you later.
Next week.
Before we go, very special thanks to all our big-time executive producers from Patreon who probably can't even hear this because they're driving around in limousines, talking on portable phones, making big business deals. But either way, Brennan Bova, Josh Page, Ben Burkhalter, Steve Cam, Kevin Lemessurier, am I saying that right? Probably not, Chip Chunkling, Scott Davis, and go Jason Waterfalls. You all rule. Thank you so much for helping us make this show. We appreciate you.
How many people you know die with a beautiful, perfect set of choppers in their puss, huh?
Well, nobody I can think of.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a skeleton farm over in India. Jeez.